Greetings, Kindred. How y'all doing today? Hope y'all are having a blessed day. I've been busy trying to catch a fox. It's practically wiped out my chickens. I had about 30 to 40 chickens and biddies, but now I'm down to maybe 10. So I decided instead of trying to catch the fox, I would catch my chickens and pen them up, so that maybe then when the fox doesn't have any chickens to eat, it'll eat what's in the trap and I can catch them. Anyway, let's get started with today's study. We're back in Ezekiel chapter 20, starting with verse 11. And in the opening verses of this 20th chapter of Ezekiel, we saw that certain elders from the house of Israel, not Judah, who were reeking from the smell of bull manure, which is what idolatry smells like to our Father, came down to ask Ezekiel for a word of wisdom from Yahweh. The asterisk, just as Moses' brother Aaron and company built a golden calf to worship in the wilderness, Jeroboam, king of the northern 10 tribes, house of Israel, had set up altars of molten calves in the high hills, high places, for the people to come and worship and bring their sacrifices. In our understanding that there is nothing new under the sun, Ecclesiastes 1, we see today that there are many altars of spiritual bull set upon the hills and street corners for people to come and worship. Their pulpits are infested with the many who would come in the last days in the name of Christ and deceive the multitudes, Matthew 13 and Matthew 24. How, you ask? By teaching the traditions of men, which is bull, instead of Yahweh's word. So who do people really worship when they go there? That's the point of this chapter for us to see. One big question to consider as one reads this chapter 20 is, how would you feel toward a child who is not only ungrateful for all that you have done for him or her, but who totally disregards your instructions with an in-your-face attitude, and then turns around as if nothing was wrong and asks you to do him a favor? That is exactly how Yahweh views these elders of Israel. So he told Ezekiel to tell them regarding their inquiry, no way. He's not going to answer their requests until they clean up their acts. We now continue our study where Yahweh is recapping to Ezekiel the way he feels about how his children have treated him after all the wondrous and marvelous things he did for them in bringing them out of the bondage of Egypt and providing them with everything they needed to live happily ever after under his protection. They simply would not listen and obey him. Personal note, I believe Yahweh gave some of us parents, teenagers, to help us more fully understand these scriptures. Ezekiel 20, verse 11, and I gave them my statutes and showed them my judgments, which, if a man do, he shall live in them. Notice the big if. Every individual must make his own choice concerning his relationship with our Father. There's a proverb that goes around which says, if it's going to be, it's up to me. The laws, the statutes, and the judgments of Yahweh have been determined and set forth, and they are not going to change. Here's the deal. Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. So a person is free to choose to be either pro-choice or pro-misery and pro-death, though your Father obviously wants you to choose life, doesn't he? He wants you to choose life for your seed, too. Oh, and by the way, it looks like the choices one makes will be recorded, right? The record book is called the Book of Life. Revelation 20, verse 12. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before Elohim, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the Book of Life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. A person's works are determined by the choices he makes. We need to bring back the laws of Leviticus and Deuteronomy and enforce them in this nation. You see, Yahweh's laws says that when a person is convicted of premeditated murder, that he or she is to be publicly executed, and the next of kin gets to pull the guillotine lever or flip the high voltage switch. Maybe that concept would work as a new slogan for a bumper sticker. Eliminate criminals, not guns. You know, I think that's a pretty good bumper sticker. I'm going to see if I can't make one of those. Ezekiel 20, verse 12. Moreover, also I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Yahweh, that sanctify them. If Yahweh's children would just keep his Sabbaths, which means rests, as he commanded, they would not be so easily thrown off track and do things like hunt Ishtar eggs and bring symbols of fertility like bunny rabbits into the house of Yahweh. The first Sabbath and the most important one, the highest day in all of Christianity, is the Passover. It is to be observed forever, though now not with the killing of a lamb, because Yeshua Christ, the Lamb of Yahweh, became our Passover. That's in 1 Corinthians 5, verse 7. He is the sign between Yahweh and man. Verse 13. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. Excuse me. They walked not in my statutes, and they despised my judgments, which, if a man do, he shall even live in them, and my Sabbaths, and they greatly polluted. Then I said, I would pour out my fury upon them in the wilderness to consume them. Okay, I had to wet my whistle there for a second. Today, the traditions of men, Bull, have replaced his word and his Sabbaths, just as the molten calves replaced them in the days of Jeroboam. Our father was not happy with idolatrous worship then, and he is not happy with it now. Verse 14. But I wrought for my name's sake that it should not be polluted before the heathen, in whose sight I brought them out. Our Father loves the heathen too, for they are also his children. Of course, he wants them to know as well that he is one and only Yahweh. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a minute. In Christian identity, we do not consider the heathen to be Yahweh's children. You might want to do some research on that. Okay, let's continue. Ezekiel 20, verse 15. Yet also I lifted up my hand unto them in the wilderness, that I would not bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. When Yahweh lifts up his hands, watch out, someone is about to get spanked. Why? How about for disobedience? Isn't that why you discipline your children? Okay, I want to take a minute and go back to my previous comment about heathens. I looked up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and heathen means a person who is not religious or whose religion is not Judaism, Islam, or especially Christianity. I just want to say that if an Israelite happens to be in the dark right now and doesn't believe in Yeshua Christ or even Yahweh, they are still his children. However, when I speak of the heathen, I speak of those who are not Yahweh's children, which are those who descend from the seed line of the Nephilim and of Cain, who was fathered by the serpent. You might want to do some research on that as well, because that was not part of Yahweh's plan, because the Nephilim produced the giants and Yahweh destroyed them, except for a small remnant that happened to escape. And if they had been Yahweh's children, he wouldn't have destroyed them. He would have tried to have saved them. Nevertheless, let's continue with our study. Verse 16. Because they despised my judgments and walked not in my statutes, but polluted my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. Yes, Yahweh's Passover has become polluted with a tradition of man called Easter, which is not even to be found in the New Testament manuscripts. So where did it come from? Verse 17, Nevertheless, mine eyes spared them from destroying them, neither did I make an end of them in the wilderness. Notice our Father does not act or react upon emotions, but all his decisions are based on what is right and what is good for all of his children. Verse 18, But I said unto their children in the wilderness, Walk ye not in the statutes of your fathers, neither observe their judgments, nor defile yourselves with their idols. I might add, these heathen people, they had their own idols. For example, take the Africans. Their religion was voodoo, and they had idols of these voodoo characters that they would use in their magic and their chants. And other cultures too had their idolatrous symbols. And the children of Israel were actually engaging in some of their practices, and this is what was so infuriating to Yahweh. Okay, I digress. Let's continue. The parents wouldn't listen, so he told their children to quit observing the religious practices of their parents. How about you? What about the religion of your parents? Of course, they were or are good people, but have you checked out what you have been taught to believe with what the Bible actually says? You say you don't feel there's any need to check it out? If it was good enough for Grandma and Grandpa, it's good enough for you too? Bad choice, pal. That will be recorded in the book. Count on it. This might be a good time to quote one of the greatest Christian scholars of all time, E.W. Bullinger, who wrote the following in the introduction to one of his books titled, How to Enjoy the Bible, American Christian Press, 1983, page 6. When we come to ask ourselves and say, where did I learn this? How did I get this? Who taught me this? It is astonishing to find how much we have imbibed from man and from tradition, and not directly and for ourselves from the word of Elohim. All that we have learned from our youth must be tested and proved by the word of Elohim. Where we find it is true, we must learn it all over again from Elohim. And where it will not stand the test of his word, we must not only be content but thankful to give it up and receive divine revelation in the place of man's imagination. Not very many people have the courage to seek the truth from his word. Ezekiel 20, verse 19. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Walk in my statutes and keep my judgments and do them. This is the first commandment repeated here. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Verse 20. And hallow my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that ye may know that I am Yahweh, your Elohim. There's commandment number 4, too. I guess this means the Easter Bunny is going to have to go, doesn't it? The practices and worship of Easter, or Ishtar, are an abomination to our Father. Perhaps most of our parents kept it or keep it. What should we do now? Answer: get to work and start studying. 2 Timothy 2, verse 15. Study to show thyself approved unto Elohim, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And do 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good. Of course, the choice is an individual one. We don't have to do our homework, but we should expect the teacher will record an F in the book beside our name, shouldn't we? It would seem, however, that if a person believes Yeshua Christ when he said that many would be deceived by the traditions of men in these last days, that the probability is pretty high that a person has been covered by bull manure and stinks to high heaven like the elders of Israel. One can take his chances or do his homework. Okay, Ezekiel 20, verse 21. Notwithstanding, the children rebelled against me. They walked not in my statutes, neither kept my judgments to do them, which, if a man do, he shall even live in them. They polluted my Sabbaths. Then I said, I would pour out my fury upon them to accomplish my anger against them in the wilderness. Even after they knew better and were warned, they went back to their religious practices of their parents in Egypt. Verse 22. Nevertheless, I withdrew mine hand and wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be polluted in the sight of the heathen, in whose sight I brought them forth. Verse 23, I lifted up mine hand unto them also in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the heathen and disperse them through the countries. I'm going to stop here a minute because this is a good time to look up this word heathen in the Old Testament and see what that definition tells us. Okay, it's quite a long definition. If you want to find it, it's in Hebrew. Let's see, I had it just here. Hebrew. It's the Hebrew word goy. H1471, and it basically means people other than Israel. Okay, so let's continue. Remember, when Yahweh lifts his hand up, someone is going to get it. Our Father decided that instead of zapping his children, he would scatter them among the heathen. So it was written, and so it was done. History documents it for all who care to do the research. The following verse declares the reason why he scattered them. Ezekiel 20, verse 24. Because they had not executed my judgments, but had despised my statutes and had polluted my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after their fathers' idols. I'm going to stop here a minute and just make a comment. Thought popped into my mind that today our Father hasn't scattered us amongst the heathen. However, when we came to this country, the United States, which was founded by Israelites, the Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, Germanic, Nordic, and kindred people, he now, instead of scattering us amongst the heathen for disobedience, instead, due to our disobedience, he is bringing the heathen and mixing them amongst us. Okay, just think on that for a minute. When you find your kids doing something that they shouldn't be doing and you tell them to quit doing it, how do you feel when they just ignore you and continue to do it? Don't tell me you don't get angry. This is Lance you're talking to. 25. Wherefore I gave them also statutes that were not good, and judgments whereby they should not live. Yahweh didn't give them bad statutes. The Hebrew word for gave, Nathan, used as a verb in this verse, means that he permitted or suffered them to adopt bad statutes. One translation reads, I let them adopt customs and laws which were worthless. It was their choice. The problem is that many didn't make the grade and they died in the wilderness. Ezekiel 20, verse 26. And I polluted them in their own gifts, in that they caused to pass through the fire all that openeth the womb, that I might make them desolate to the end, that they might know that I am Yahweh. You can read in any reputable Bible dictionary about Moloch worship, which is this passing through the fire, where the idolatry became so abominable that some sacrificed their own children. I will help, but I'm not going to do your homework for you. With 4 children, I've had a lot of experience using that statement. Verse 27, Therefore, Son of man, speak unto the house of Israel, and say unto them, Thus saith Yahweh Elohim, Yet in this your fathers have blasphemed me, in that they have committed a trespass against me. I'm going to stop a minute. That's a good definition for blasphemed or blasphemy. Here it means that a person has committed a trespass against Yahweh. Okay, verse 28. For when I had brought them into the land for which I lifted up mine hand to give to them, then they saw every high hill and all the thick trees, and they offered their sacrifices, and there they presented the provocation of their offering. There also they made their sweet Savior and poured out their drink offerings. Yahweh lifted up his hand against Egypt to bring Israel out of bondage, and what thanks did he get? The children went after other gods and gave those gods, who are no gods, their sacrifices. On top of that, they even practiced the quick-like-a-bunny sexual orgies in the groves in honor of Ishtar, or Easter. Don't take my word for it. Do some homework on Easter. Ezekiel 20, verse 29. Then I said unto them, What is the high place whereunto ye go? And the name thereof is called Bama unto this day. What is the high place where people go today to worship? No, wrong answer. It is not Alabama. The word Bama is not short for Alabama or Alabama. Do you see what kind of ridiculous things man can come up with when he doesn't do his homework? Next thing you know, he'll come up with a crazy idea like Yahweh will torture bad people forever and ever in an inferno like Dante's, or people will fly away in a rapture mobile, or Christ was crucified on a Friday. Bama means a high place, particularly where sacrifices are made to other gods. Today they are called churches. In our next study, Yahweh is going to want to know if the high places, the churches of our nation, are polluted after the manner of our fathers. What do you think? Okay, this ends this section of the study. We'll pick it up next time, starting with chapter 30. I think that's where we go next. Let me double check on that just to make sure. Yes, it'll be 30 through verse 49, and that'll be the end of chapter 20. Okay, until then, have a blessed day. Yahweh bless.